and what are your preparations for that? Thank you for your attention attached to the employment issue. Employment is related to people's daily life, and according to General Secretary Xi Jingjing, that is the biggest issue concerning the people's livelihood. We have made a lot of progress last year. In general, it's stabilized. We can look at it from two aspects. First of all, the newly added jobs. Last year, in urban and rural areas, the newly added jobs amounted to 13.61 million, with an increase of 100,000 for 6 years consecutively. We have an yearly newly added of jobs by 13 million. And second, the unemployment rate is very low. The registered rate is 3.8%, and the investigated rate is more than 4%, but both of the figures are decreasing. However, we are still facing the challenges. First of all, the employment volume is very huge. We have 900 million people waiting for a job. That is a big pressure for the country. And second, we have the structural problem. At the same time, we have people having difficulty to find a job and having people who have a difficulty in hiring the people, hiring the workers. And this year, a stable employment is on top of the seek stabilization work. In the government's work report, we have made the arrangements, and it is stressed that we have to give the priority to employment. So what does it mean? Personally, I think that we should look at the word priority. There are two priorities. First of all, we should give priority to the objectives. First of all, the job finding, job seeking should be one important part, prioritize the part of the economic growth. And second, we should give the prioritized support. For example, the monetary support, the financial support, and educational support should all come together to form a synergy to help the job seeking. That said, we should know that to improve the employment in China, all departments should contribute their parts of efforts. And for our ministry, we have this responsibility. We have to put the focus and strengthen our efforts. To strengthen our focus on the key population, we should give the priority to the key population. For example, the new graduates from the universities, the migrant workers, retired soldiers, and also people living in difficulties. And we should give targeted policies to help them to solve their own problems. For the three strengthened efforts, first of all, to reduce the burden, second, to increase the guarantee, and third, to increase the training. First of all, to cut the burdens of the enterprises. If you want the jobs to be guaranteed, then you have to let the enterprises thrive. We have to cut their burden and give them more subsidies, especially to lower down their contribution to the Social Security Fund, and also give them the reimbursement of the contribution of Social Security Fund in the case that they don't sack the people. And for the subsidy, we can give the qualified enterprises some subsidies for their contribution to the Social Security. And that is the first measure to cut the burden. Second, to increase the training. We should open a wide range of professional training, and that can help us to realize the goal of one stone, multiple birds. Today, with the jobless insurance fund, we will give 100 billion yuan to form more than 15 million people When people are skilled, then they can be benefited over their lifetime. They can have more capacity to find a job, and we can have a more skilled talents for our country. This can also help to solve the problem of the inequality between the employees and employers. The high-skilled employees are always in shortage in China. We have this figure. Usually, there are two positions in China waiting for one high-skilled employees. This means that they are in great shortage. And the third thing we are about to do is to strengthen the guarantees for them, to guarantee people's rights and interests. For those jobless people, we should get them registered and give them social guarantees. For the families with zero workers, we have to help them to get out of this difficult situation. And for the people living in poverty, we have to adopt a pragmatic measures to help them too. That is all for this question. Next one, please. I'm from Jingjing. Minister, you have mentioned that we should lower the fees for the contribution to social security. This year in the government's work report, it is mentioned several times that we are about to adopt measures to reduce the burdens of the enterprises and lower their contribution to the social security fund. However, there are also worries and doubts. They want to know whether these will obstruct the normal functioning of this fund, and what are the future measures by your ministry? I think this is a very targeted question, and it has received full attention from the social circle. This time, the government has decided to lower enterprise contribution to the Social Security Fund, especially for the pension security. It's lowered to 16% now. For some provinces, they can enjoy a cut by 4%. I think that these kind of measures of fees reduction are aimed at improving the activity of the enterprises and cutting their burdens. Only by doing so can we make our economy more sustainable and realize a long-term development. Today, the nominal fees of the Social Security is at a relatively high level. We still have the potential to lower them down. This is due to the historical reasons. And then to a longer-term point of view, after the reduction of the burden, the Social Security's enterprises could contribute less to the Social Security Fund. They can expand their production. In this case, they will ask for more workers to come and work. In that case, the enterprises in return can also pay more to cover more people's Social Security. In that case, that means we still have maintained sources for the Social Security Fund. So in that regard, we have the capacity to guarantee the distribution of the Social Security coverage. And this time, in the government's work report, it is said that this year we're about to improve the Social Security care for the people. I have 3 things to share with you. First of all, after the reduction of the fees and contribution, we have calculated the balance of payments. In general, we can make sure that we have more income than the expenditure. Second is that the accumulated amount is sufficient. According to the calculation, in recent years, the stocked fund by the enterprises have reached 4.87 trillion yuan, actually, 4.87 trillion yuan. That means with our Social Security Fund, we have a very strong guarantee capacity. And the third, the strategic reserve is in place. For the National Fund for Social Security, we have 2 trillion yuan, and it is also growing up. Based on that 3 facts just mentioned, we have adopted the other following measures. That is how we can ensure the in-time distribution of Social Security care to the people. Please be assured. Thank you, Mr. Minister. The next minister, please. Minister of Waterworks of China. Now the floor is open for your questions.
部长您好，我是湖北日报全媒记者，我有4个问题
Good
想问
morning,
您。
Minister. I'm from Hubei Daily. I have 4 questions actually. In recent years, in China there are a lot of abnormal weather conditions in China, especially for our province. So what is your preparation for the drought and the flood prevention and control? In the middle part of the Yangtze River, and today for the fight against the flood and drought, it belongs to the responsibility of the Ministry of the Emergency. And what is your following work? Last year, in the organizational reform, the prevention and control of flood and drought has been moved to the other administration, and the direction of the management has been shifted to another authority. I thought it was a very good decision because after this reform, we can optimize and coordinate the resources.
As to the functionalities of flood and drought control, we have a better clear of division and more professionalism introduced. For example, in flood and drought control, our agency is mainly responsible for water projects, management and operation. Undoubtedly, that is our province and our profession. For the Emergency Response Department, it's responsible for emergency response and prevention, which means when a flood strikes, it shall be responsible for relocating the affected population. For the Ministry of Emergency Response, that is also their profession. So, in this reform, 2 departments can give play to their own strengths, and that explains the reliability and effectiveness of this reform. That's why it's widely accepted. For flood control and prevention this year, days ago, together with the Meteorological Bureau, we did a forecast, but the result was not very good. This year, we forecast that we will have a relatively poor year. Usually, the rainfall is concentrated in southern China, and northern China is in lack of rainfalls. So flood will be a severe situation in southern China, particularly as has been said along the Yangtze River. Yangtze River is right in southern China, which witnesses usually more rainfall. So we predict that there will be some flood in southern China, particularly along Yangtze River in the downstream. So we must stay alerted. The Ministry of Water Resources must stay alerted and work around the clock, and must make some preparatory measures we will strictly accord to the requirements of General Secretary Xi Jinping and fulfill our new functionalities with highlights given to 3 works. The first one is we must emphasize on the prediction and early warning of a flood. We will make attempts to give early warning at an early date and improve the precision of such forecast. Secondly, we will step up our efforts in operation management of water resource projects. We have about 98,000 reservoirs and 350,000 kilometers of dams. We will utilize those facilities to fend off any flood outbreak. Thirdly, we will improve our coordination with other agencies like the Ministry of Emergency Response in order to fight against floods and drought together. Especially, we must guarantee the safe operation of those reservoirs, particularly along the Yangtze River. For those groups of reservoirs, we must better manage them and utilize them. There are about a large number of big reservoirs, totaling about 40. Those 40 reservoirs will play key roles in reducing the flood occurrence and guaranteeing people's safety. This year, we will make whatever effort it takes to guarantee people's security. Just like the government work report has explained, we will present good results of flood and drought control to welcome the 70th anniversary this year. Thank you. From Farmers Daily, Premier Li Keqiang specified in his government work report that we will solve the issue of safe drinking water to guarantee the 16 million farmers' need of drinking water. So what will your ministry do to help those farmers out of such a difficult situation? Thank you for your concern for our farmers. In the government work report, Premier Li Keqiang gave very stringent and explicit requirements for drinking water. So that's why my ministry is under pressure against so many backdrops right now. After decades of efforts, China has already established a relatively fully fledged water supply system in the rural area. It can support 940 million rural residents, and the coverage ratio is about 81%. So that's almost the coverage of all rural areas, and its market achievements. But with the economic growth over the past years, some new problems started to surface. For example, now there are some projects in rural areas underway about water supply. It was put in place 20 years ago with very low standard, and some of those facilities are aging, so the supply ratio of those facilities are deteriorating. Another problem is there has been sharp increase of water demand with economic growth. So for the rural area, the supply of water resources toward the rural area and the agriculture sector is declining. Another key problem is water pollution. Water pollution is getting ever more severe over the past years. There are also some complicated social problems. For example, a large number of migrant workers are leaving the farmland to the urban areas, so which means many facilities of water supply in the rural areas are idle assets. I talked about 940 farmers, but only 600 of them are still living here in the rural areas. So such a shortage of labor in the rural areas cannot guarantee the operation of those facilities. But we cannot abandon those facilities. As you know, during the spring festivals, the migrant workers will return to their homeland. So that's a dilemma. There are a lot of similar problems, and it's rather difficult to resolve them all at once. That's why my Ministry of Water Resources is under huge pressure. But we have very clear stance. No matter how challenging it is, we will take tough resolve to solve them with no hesitation. As General Secretary Xi Jinping said, people's aspiration for a better life is the destination we are working for. And he said that whether we can build a moderately prosperous society in a round way relies on our fellows. So we are working all for our fellow farmers' aspiration for a better life. If our farmers cannot access to enough safe, clean drinking water, it's not a moderately prosperous society at all. And that's why Ministry of Water Resources will do whatever we can to tackle those problems with no other options. This year, we will work on 4 measures. The first one is according to the arrangement of the State Council, the central and local government will allocate some money while attracting social financial sources to elevate and upgrade the current aging facilities of water supply in order to guarantee the supply of water resources. We've been doing this for 3 years already. Central and local government has already allocated 120 billion RMB yuan, and this year that amount is going to rise again from the central government. Secondly, we will work with the Ministry of Ecology and Environment to protect the environment of the source region of those waterways. In total, we will cover about 12,000 source places in the rural areas. Thirdly, we will improve the project operation and management with professional management agencies and dedicated fund for that purpose, to ensure that those rural water supply facilities will be under operation. And fourthly, we will introduce an accountability system in the provincial, municipal levels. We will hold those people accountable. And for the government personnel, we will ask them to honor their functionalities of supervision and control. To that end, Ministry of Water Resources this year will pay visits to at least 3,000 villages. There will also be a channel of making complaints, which is designed to improve supervision and accountability. And under the leadership of the Central Committee and CPC, we will strictly fulfill the requirements of the governmental report to guarantee our farmers access to safe drinking water. Thank you. The next minister. Deputy Director General of NDRC and Head of the State Statistics Bureau, Mr. Ning. Now the floor is open. I would firstly want to thank our media friends for your attention to our bureau. And on behalf of Mr. He, I also want to thank you for your support of NDRC. Good morning, Mr. Ning. Statistics have been receiving attention from the people. For example, GDP. People are not just concerned about the data itself, but also about the way of getting such data. So my question is, for the calculation of GDP, can it be aligned with the international standard? How can we guarantee its accuracy and that it's science-based? Thank you for your important questions. Our calculation system of GDP has undergone 40 years of improvement since reform and opening up. Particularly since the 18th National Congress and the third plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee, our calculation of GDP has made some improvements and it has been transformed. For now, the system of getting the GDP result is stringently conformant to international standards. The figures about GDP calculation are reliable, scientific, and comparable to the international data. The United Nations, World Bank, and IMF and OECD have given their consent and recognition of our data. We also joined the standards made by IMF. It's called SDDC. People usually take it as the market access of statistics. So please be reassured about the standards of calculating GDP. In 5 ways. Firstly, we already took 3 kinds of different measures to calculate GDP results. For example, looking at indicators of production, income and revenues, and expenditures. Every year we will publish the results of GDP from those 3 angles. Quarterly speaking, we mainly use the production indicator to calculate GDP, and we are also moving towards expenditure as the basis of calculation. Secondly, we already have formulated 5 basic standards for calculation.
First of all, the domestic production and national income. That is the sheet of the calculation. Another is the capital sheet, and another is the balance of payment sheet, and another is the balance sheet. Third, we have applied multiple methods at the same time to investigate and collect the basic data for accounting and calculation. Every 5 years, we're about to do the general investigation in the nationwide. Every 10 years, we will do the agricultural national investigation, and every 5 years, economic investigation. We will transfer the data from more than 1 million large-scale enterprise. We transfer that online, and it is a direct transfer. It will come from the source and directly go to the Bureau of Statistics. And then we calculate the cost of the labor and the materials by the sampling tests. Those are the multiple measures that we could use to make sure that those data we collected are genuine and reliable. There are also 3 accounting tasks. First of all, the domestic GDP will be calculated in a general way according to the instructions of the central government. We have started this work this year, and by 2020, we will have the general accounting method for the calculation of the local GDP. And next, we will elaborate the asset sheet for the national level and local level for the assets and liabilities. And then we also have the asset and liability table for the natural resources. And then for the new economies, the digital economy, platform economies, they are also under calculation. We are exploring our way out. And for the three new forms of economies, we have put in place the mechanisms. Starting by 2015 until 2017, according to the calculation, the three new forms of economy represents 14.8, 15.3, and 15.8% of the GDP. In Shanghai and Shenzhen, that proportion is even higher to reach more than 30% of their local GDP. And the added volume can even represent 40 to 50%. This means the new forms of economy have become the pillar of the national economy. From many aspects, we could tell that the national economic accounting is reliable and scientific, and is also comparable and genuine. Over the past 3 years, I worked as the Director General of the Statistics Bureau. I have maintained a good contacts with the national counterparts. They said that China's methods of calculation are among the leading group of the countries, in particular for the calculation of the new forms of economy. China is leading the world. Next question, please.
谢谢主持人，新华社记者。
Thank you.
我们注意到不久前的地方两会上，有部分省区
We
实
have
施下调
noticed
了
that in the
2019年的
local
GDP
two
增长目标。
sessions,
有机构
some
认
of
为
them have
，2019年对中国来说，
reduced
或
their
许是
GDP
国际金融
growth
危机以来
target.
预测前景最为
Maybe
悲观的一年。想问一下宁主任，从
That is
今年
the
头2个月
most
的经济数据看，
pessimistic
您如何
year
看
after
2019年中国经济走势？
2008
谢谢。
financial crisis. And what is your prediction for the China's economic growth of this year? In the People's Congress, I have heard such discussions. Actually, the expected economic growth ratio between 6 to 6.5%. This is the set target. Actually, among the most advanced economies in the world, that is the highest level. China has already a very big economic aggregate. This is also a medium to high ratio of economic growth, considering China's economic status quo. This is favorable to maintain the employment, increase people's income, and improve people's livelihood. It is also favorable to restructure the economy, improve the efficiency, and have a high-quality growth. It is also good to strengthen the market, to support the consumption, and also have a mutually beneficial trade relations with the other countries. For the first 2 months of this year, we are calculating with the collection of the information. By the 14th of March, our bureau will publish the economic data for the first 2 months of this year. According to the information that we have had a very good start for this year's economic operation. First of all, the production is promising. For the 3 sectors, agricultural basis is strong. The winter wheat and the infrastructure-based planting are doing well. For the industries, they are doing very steadily during the 2nd month. For the electricity, they have accelerated the production after the Spring Festival. We have registered a growth of 6.7%. For the first 10 days of this month, the National Grid has published the data. the daily generated electricity has increased by 11%. For the service sector, it is growing continuously, especially for the information service and trading service, and as well as the other modern service parts. And secondly, the consumption is also satisfying. During the Spring Festival, the trading of goods has increased by 8.6% year-on-year. Tourism by 8.2%. And the film market increased by 5.8 billion yuan. And for the characteristics of the consumption, first of all, the consumption of service is faster than the consumption of goods. And then the rural consumption is growing faster than that in the cities. And today, we are developing new forms of consumption, combining the online and offline consumption. Third, the pricing and employment are both stable. For the pricing data, it's already disclosed for the first 2 months. The CPI in China has registered a year-on-year increase of 1.6%. Among which the fresh vegetables, fruits, seafood, the meat have registered a very mild increase. For the diesel and gasoline, a very small increase, and the PPI has registered a year-on-year increase of 0.1%. The upstream products have seen their prices increasing a little bit, and they have seen their cost eased. As to the employment, the situation is quite stable too. Our bureau has invested the enterprises in 22 provinces and regions. We have invested to see what is the situation of employment after the Spring Festival. And 80% of those enterprises have seen 90% of the workers coming back to work after the Spring Festival. And for the trade, for the first 2 months, imports and exports, total volume has increased a year-on-year increase of 0.8%, so that is a positive increase. If we eliminate the factor of the Spring Festival, then for February, the import and export increase is 10.5%, among which export and import respectively by an increase of 8.1% and 13.1%. And starting by the beginning of March, the increase could reach even 20%. These are under the impact of a certain seasonal factors. And for the foreign exchange reserve, by the end of February, it has reached 3.09 trillion US dollars. That is the 4th month to grow in a row. And for the market expectation, it's in general promising. And manufacturing PMR ratio is very good. And for an indicator indicating the future manufacturing prospect has increased by 1 percentage point.
那么，这是反映这个生产市场这个预期。
This reflects the status quo of the manufacturing market, and for the consumption market, the consumer's confidence indicator has increased by 2.3% to reach 126. And for the financial market indicator, the Shanghai stock market indicator has increased by 20%. Judging by the 5 above-mentioned aspects, at the beginning of this year, the Chinese economy is growing steadily.
趋势向好，谢谢大家。
And the momentum is promising. Thank you.
有请下一位部长。
The next minister, please.
最高人民检察院童建明副检察长来到台前。
Mr. Tong,
是
the
两高
Vice
负责人
President
首次走上部长通道。
of the
下面有请大家提
Supreme
问。
People's Procuratorate. Now the floor
谢
is
谢主持
open
人
for your，
童检察
question.
长好。
Thank
未来
you.
网中国少年报提问：我们注意到，近日来多位代表委员呼吁加大女童保护的力度，
Recently,
同时
several
也加强
delegates have
儿童预
proposed
防
that we
性侵
should
教育
strengthen
的
the
力度。
protection
最高
of
检
the
工作报告中也
younger
提到了
people
，2018
and
年
also the
向
women.
教育部发出了1号检查建议。请问建议发
In
出之后收到了
2012, the
哪些效
Ministry
果
of？
此外，
Education has
近年
also
来低
published
龄
the
未成年
document
的
for the
恶性暴力
protection.
事件频
In
发，有人质
recently,
疑说，检察
we
机
have
关
seen
对
a
未
lot
成年
of
的罪错行
cases
为
of
保护过大，
bullying the
惩戒力度不足，对此您是怎么看
We
待
say that
的？
the
谢谢。
protection is insufficient,
谢谢你
and
的提问。
also the punishment
未成
towards
年
the
人保护
criminals
工
are
作
not enough.
涉及到
What do you think
两
of
个方面
that?，
一个
The
是被害，
protection of
一
the
个是
children
侵害，就是对
is
未成年
related
人
to
的
two
权益
subjects. One is
的犯罪，
that they
侵
are
害未成年人权益的
murdered,
犯罪
and another
和
case that
未
they
成
are
年人的
bullied
犯罪。
or they are hurt.
那么对未成年人的司法保护啊，就是这两个方面。
For the protection
近
of
年
the
来呢，
children,
这两个方面的案件
in recent
都
years,
持续
we
爆
have
发。
seen an increasing number of the cases.
孩子的伤是全社会的痛。我国有3亿多。
The harm dealt to the juveniles are also being felt by the entire society. We have about 300 million juveniles. The protection of such a large population matters to the happiness of
未成年人
many
的司法保护
households.
工作摆到
In the
了
past
更
1
加
year,
突出的位置。
We have given priority to the protection of those minors. Last October, the Supreme People's Procuratorate
获得改判的强
has
奸、猥亵儿
worked
童案，
together with the Supreme People's Court
从这起案件
to handle the
然后分
cases
析我们
of
这些年
affliction
办理
to
未成年
those
人案件
juveniles.
存在的问题，向
We have targeted at the problems concerning the juveniles. Based on such practices, we gave suggestions and proposals to the Ministry of Education, proposing that the certain ministry shall enhance management of the campuses and better improve the protection of juveniles in primary and secondary schools. So that was the first time for the Supreme People's Procuratorate to give proposals to any ministry. That was the number one opinion.
高检院的检察建议高度重视，
For that opinion, the Ministry of Education gave high attention with a special
青少年
group established to implement the protection measures of those
也
juveniles.
上下联动，
The other administrative agencies of all levels are coordinating with each other to solve the cases of sexual
落
harassment
实校园
and
性
with
侵
a
强制报告，
specific system in
这
place.
个女童宿舍封
They
闭
also
管理
delivered a
有这么
report
形式
about improving the confidence on campuses as well as how to protect the female
谁执法
minors,
谁伏法的要求，
as to how to promote the knowledge of the laws and regulations and who is responsible for execution of the
我们
laws,
全
we
国
have
4级检察
clarified.
院就有
For the promotion of laws,
96名检察长
1,796 procurators are taking the job of the vice president for the promotion. For example, Mr. Jingjing is responsible for the science promotion for the second middle school of Beijing. You also talked about overprotection and lack of punishment for the minor offenders. For that question, we shall take a reasonable perspective. For those juveniles, if they are hurting the society, or at the same time, they are the victims of such harms, we have to consider their immaturity in intellectual development. That's why the protection of juveniles must focus more on education and less on punishment. We believe in education, saving them gradually, which means for those minor and juvenile offenders, we have to educate them and correct them. We must have strict management of those offenders, but at the same time care for them. We tolerate them, but we cannot allow them to go widely in such offense. So that is the basic attitude and also a judicial concept when handling cases concerning those juvenile offenders. Last year, under the support of the CPC Central Committee and certain departments, Supreme People's Procuratorate specifically established the 9th Procuratorate Office and Bureau to handle the cases of juveniles. We will allow such a newly established bureau to play its role and explore the ways of handling such juvenile cases. We must have some preventative measures and categorize those cases. At the same time, we will mobilize the social forces to have joint forces in tackling such cases. We will harness the power of justice and our judicial system to protect our youngsters. More questions? Good morning, Mr. Tong. I come from the China Net. The Supreme People's Procuratorate report said that we have established the 7-day response system and 3 days of delivering a result and a feedback. So what's your consideration about such a system? Also in the report it said that the judicial rescue team is helping those vulnerable families to guarantee their safety, and there are also some non-profit supervision mechanisms. Could you give us more information? Thank you for your questions. The people-orientedness is a basic theme for our inspection, as has been required by General Secretary Xi Jinping. And Mr. Jingjing this morning in his report has emphasized this philosophy for many times. In the past year, when we are doing our inspection work, we highlight any job concerning people's benefits. In the report, it said we established such a mechanism of giving response within 7 days of receiving complaints and the 7-day system of delivering a result. What does it mean? For the procuratorate agencies, after receiving the letter of the public within the 7 days thereafter, they must give a response, at least saying that we have already received the letter. And what about the next step? Then the responsible agencies will have to handle this case and give a feedback about the progress made to the person. Mr. Jingjing said that we must give heart for heart for those letters, which means we must put ourselves in the general public's perspective. Imagine you have received a letter from your families or friends. Is it only the right thing to do to at least give a response? And for the letters from the general public, if there is no feedback at all, they will have to choose to write another letter or to give their complaints to other channels. That's why we are facing the burden of overlapping complaints. The Supreme People's Procuratorate every year in the past several years received about 180,000 such letters. We gave responses and answers in the past. Now we go more than just one response. Before we start to dive into those cases, we give a response about receiving, and after that, we will also give a result about our handling. So no matter how difficult is this problem mentioned, we have to conquer it. Supreme People's Procuratorate put ourselves responsible and also forces the other agencies to implement such a policy in order to truly help our public solving problems. You also mentioned a question about saving and rescuing those victims and their families. That is one demonstration of how our procuratorate is taking our daily work into the overall poverty alleviation efforts. For the victims, if they are injured and returned to poverty because of those cases, or they are facing the difficulties and financial difficulties in particular, or their family members have been returned to poverty because of his or her injuries, we will initiate the judicial help. Last year, for such cases of families being returned to poverty because of those injuries, was about 4,200, and we allocated about 42 million RMB yuan to rescue such families. So our judicial work is supporting the precision poverty alleviation policy. Last year, we gave more specific requirements in order to realize that. We truly want to guarantee the safety of tens of thousands of households. That is a truly project concerning people's livelihood. People rely on enough basic supports, particularly food and safety. So last year, about food safety and other security fields, we have kick-started such a prosecution channel, particularly for the cybersecurity, the surroundings of campuses, the water sources, and the food markets. We will enhance our inspection. Last year, for the cases of food safety, we handled 20,000 cases, and among them, the market supervision agencies handled a certain number of cases online, numbering 50,000. So we have explored a legal way to guarantee people's food safety when they're ordering food online. In 2019, the inspection agencies will continue to be people-centered, and we will attempt to benefit the people to guarantee fairness, justice, and safety to meet people's rising demand. We want to go deeper in our procurator's work so our common people can feel the justice and fairness of our judicial system and also feel the warmth of the system. That's my answer to your questions. I would also like to take this opportunity to give you some more information. I mentioned about the 9th Bureau of Procuratorate to focus specifically on the protection of minors. Last year, we had a systematic reform of our framework. Based on the categories of those crimes, we rearranged our agencies, and we will authorize those certain agencies based on the specific situations. For example, we have specific bureaus responsible for civil cases and specific agencies responsible for handling those non-profit cases. In total, we have 4 categories covering criminal, civil, and non-profit, and so on. So we call upon our media friends to keep paying attention to the Procurator's job and improve the supervision of us. Thank you, Mr. Tong.
有请部长通道的下一位嘉宾。
The next minister.
著名法学家、最高人民法院党组副书记、
Legal scientist,
副院长江碧新先
the
生来
Deputy
到台
Party
前。
Secretary of Supreme People's Court, Mr.
下面
Jiang.
请大家提问。
Now the floor is open.
谢谢主持人。副院长您好，
Thank you.
我是财新周刊财新
Good
网记
morning,
者
Mr. Jiang.
我想
I
请
come
问
from
您，去年
Caixin.
最高法院
My
再
question
审
is, last year the Supreme
张文
People's
宗案件、
Court
赵立明案件等
was
一批
taking the
涉
case
及
of 张
产
文
权
宗
的
and
冤
Zhao
假
Liping
错案，起到了良好
concerning
的示范效
the
果。我想
intellectual
请问
property
您，
rights.
今
That
年
was
最高法
very
院
good
是否
pilot
依然会
for
纠
similar
正一批
cases
涉
of
产
handling
权
those
民营
wrongly
企业
done
的冤假
cases.
错案？
This year,
您
will you
方便
handle
透
similar
露更
cases
多
for
信息
private
吗？谢
enterprises?
谢。
Could you disclose more information? Thank you.
Since last year, the Supreme People's Court has worked under the instructions of the CPC Central Committee and also the speech decisions of General Secretary Xi Jinping. We have adopted several measures to correct those unjust, false, and erroneous cases. That case you have mentioned, Mr. Zhang, is a symbolic case. 10 years ago, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And then he was announced freed from the prison last year by May. For the next step to come, we will work harder to correct those unjust and false cases. First of all, we should unify our ideology in the judging of the cases. We should always judge according to the law. For those actions not described in the criminal law, they should not be pursued as the criminal actions. And for those doubtful cases, we should treat them as innocent. And for the shortage of proofs, the cases can be treated as innocent. We will also put the verdict according to the proofs and evidence. For those cases without enough evidence, they cannot be considered as a criminal one, and so no criminal punishment. Second, while drawing the line to separate criminal and non-criminal, we should do more work. We will stick to 3 types of cases. First, the cases about the fraudulence of contract and people who have misused or abused the assets, and the entrepreneurs and private entrepreneurs related cases. Those are the key areas that we will pay attention to. The second, the cases where people have invested in other places than their own cities. And the third, sometimes due to the change of leader generations and due to the changes of the persons in charge, some cases are postponed in the judge. For then, we're about to do more work and be very patient to draw that line and distinguish the criminal ones from the non-criminal ones. And the third work we're about to do, we should be more careful in the distinction of cases. In this regard, we're about to set the civil disputes with the criminal acts. We can never consider the civil disputes as a criminal case, and we would never transform the civil responsibility into a criminal one. We can never consider those small flaws and errors as huge ones and then give very hard sentence to the private entrepreneurs. And fourth, we should make more detailed guidelines and also a system of work. For those basic policies, we will use the symbolic cases and judicial explanations to clarify the fundamentals of the judging. To one hand, we're about to give the support to the judging of the judges. To the other side, that is about to give more showcasing to the entrepreneurs. Fifth work we're about to do, we should base ourselves on the mechanism of avoiding the unjust, false, and erroneous cases. According to the demand of the rightfulness of the procedures, we will show more respect to the person in the case and also their lawyers. And based on the protection of their rights and interests, we can supervise the verdict of the judges. We will make sure that the judicial authority can be applied in the right way. And we hope that by applying all those above-mentioned measures, the laws can become a fundamental protection of the entrepreneurs, especially for those who work in private sector. And today, laws can do more to support the work of the private entrepreneurs, and the judges today can become the protector of the legitimate rights and interests of those private entrepreneurs and also the growth of the private economy. Thank you.
好，请继续提问。
Next question, please.
贾院长好，成都商报红星新闻记者提问。
Good
然后
morning.
您
I'm
刚
from
刚也说
Chengdu
到，其实
Business
产权保护确实是
Journal.
今
You
年
have
2条报
mentioned
告的
that
热词，然后也是这个工
IP
作报告的热
protection
词。
is a
那么，
Buzzword of this year's government's work report, and before some private enterprises have been punished and sentenced due to some small errors or even the civil disputes. So this has aroused the worries of the others. Starting by this year, what are the measures that you're about to take to protect the legitimate rights and interests of the private entrepreneurs? The Supreme People's Court has applied carefully the guidelines of the Party Central Committee to protect the rights and interests of the entrepreneurs and also the growth of the private economy. We have also applied the decisions of General Secretary Xi Jinping during the conference of the promotion of private economy. We have adopted multiple measures to protect the private economy and the private entrepreneurs. I could give you 3 aspects about the protection. First of all, we have taken a series of measures, and second, we have formed a synergy. We should also listen carefully to the suggestions of all parties. We have organized in total 5 seminars to listen to the suggestions of the private entrepreneurs. So we know their pain point and also their source of worries. We have to know what they are caring about and what are they waiting for. And second, we have to renew our ideas and thinking model. For all those thinking discriminating the private economy and private entrepreneurs, they should be abolished and eliminated. And for those who have increased the liabilities of the private entrepreneurs and limited the rights and interests of the entrepreneurs, they should be abandoned too. If the judicial procedure is unfavorable to the development of the private economy and private entrepreneurs, they should be abandoned. For the investigation, starting by the establishment of the case until the making of the verdict, we have made a systematic investigation, and we have checked whether there are some irrational arrangements in that procedures. Finally, we have discovered more than 20 of them, and these should be all corrected. And fourth, we have published 3 regulating documents to protect the IP rights, the rights and interests of the entrepreneurs, and also the growth of private economy. The Supreme People's Court is engaged and fully determined to protect the rights and interests of the private entrepreneurs. And the Supreme People's Court, they can also provide more cases and symbolic cases for the others to follow. In total, in 2 rounds of work, we have published several cases to showcase to the people how the central government is protecting the rights and interests of the private entrepreneurs and also the growth of the private economy. At the same time, for the judging of the cases among all the people's court, this is a very good example to follow. Fifth, for some cases pending over years, and those cases related to private economy and private entrepreneurs, we have calculated they are up to 200. So we have to urge the relevant departments to accelerate their work. So for the policy chains, there are several factors to mention. First, we have to improve the efficiency in our judging work. For some enterprises in difficulty and some enterprises at the stage of bankruptcy, we have to accelerate the procedure of verdict so that they can get out of difficulty as soon as possible. While as to the forcible measures, in the range allowed by the law, if it is not necessary to use the forcible measures, then we will not use it. We'll try to minimize the cases of using the forcible measures as possible, as long as it is not damaging the third party's interest. And upon the condition of respecting this judicial spirit, while there are several possibilities of verdict, then the judge should choose the method that is the best for the party engaged to protect their interests. Thirdly, we uphold the principles of fair protection. We require that while avoiding the loss of state assets, the private economy's interests cannot be abandoned. And purely because of protection of public interests, we cannot hurt the rights and interests of private economy and the entrepreneurs. Some private enterprises may be small in size, but we cannot allow the large scale of enterprises to bully the smaller ones or to ignore the legitimate rights of different types of private enterprises. Fifthly, for law enforcement, we have some traditional philosophies of law enforcement. When judging some cases, we will firstly seek the truth. Together with the Industry and Commerce Federation, we will publish some documents about the standards. We will take flexible methods to handle the cases and disputes concerning private enterprises.
when enforcing the laws and regulations, and in case relevant to bankruptcy, or for cases concerning the difference between zombie enterprises and the hopeful enterprises, we must take proper measures to reinvigorate those latter enterprises in order to be revived. We will take some adjustment measures and take some reconciliation measures to solve the cases first place. We will abide by the precondition of not harming certain parties' interests. When the certain parties have the potential, we will try to let the private enterprises out in order to enjoy long-term development. Sixthly, we must take quick actions to deliver the benefits in a timely fashion. For cases relevant to private enterprises and entrepreneurs, our enforcement must be quick, and we take such cases as important starting points for resolving such difficult cases. While not contradicting the regular rules of enforcement, we will give first priority to the cases concerning private economy. We will give them the green pass in order to deliver quick results for the entrepreneurs and benefits. With such policies, for one thing, we hope to present very detailed codes of conduct for those entrepreneurs. We also hope to guide the judgment. We also have a series of efforts by handling those cases. Firstly, we not only have to protect the rights of property and their safety of those entrepreneurs, we also have to protect the entrepreneur's dignity and intellectual property rights. So we target at comprehensive protection, physically and intellectually. Secondly, our protection goes more than formalities. We want to give some tangible protection to those entrepreneurs in order to truly render fairness and equality. Thirdly, People's Court will take the responsibilities of protecting the private enterprises. We will also be the coordinator in order to bring about joint forces, and our protection will be multiplied. Fourthly, for the lower levels of People's Court will join this force. Also, the administrative lawsuits agencies must be supportive by executing their authority and responsibilities to protect the legitimate rights of the entrepreneurs. So we will introduce a mechanism of coordinated protection by different levels. Fifthly, we will have a review of individual cases. We will go one case by one, and we also establish such a long-term mechanism to ensure the fairness and justice of handling such cases. So we want to establish such a sustainable protection mechanism in the long run. I believe with those policies and measures, the People's Court's judgment can guarantee the rights and benefits of private economy and entrepreneurs with a very effective and favorable legal environment. And those entrepreneurs can do their job of business development and innovation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jiang. The next minister, please. Mr. Chen Baoshen from Ministry of Education. Now the floor is open. Thank you. I come from Inner Mongolia television. In recent years, the primary and secondary school students' educational burden has been reduced. But while the teachers are reducing the burden, some parents are giving mounting pressure on their children. According to the feedback, some homework given by the teachers used to be a huge burden on the children, so the parents sometimes step in to do the homework for the children. So will there be any measures taken to solve that issue? Thank you for your question. The question is quite a new one in the burden reduction efforts. Before the 2 sessions last year, the Ministry of Education worked together with 6 other agencies to promulgate a document about handling those after-class educational and training institutions. We took about 4 measures. The first one is the screening and investigation of those educational and training agencies to get a brief idea about the situation. Secondly, for the 14,000 agencies involved, about 27,000 agencies have problems. So our correction targets at such 27,000 educational and training agencies. Thirdly, last August, NDRC introduced an opinion about regulating the development of the training agencies beyond the campus. So for those training agencies and institutions, they have to develop themselves according to such document. Fourthly, consolidation of the progress made. We have already tackled 98% of the total subjects. And in such correction process, there are some problems like you have mentioned. Some training agencies are transferring the battlefields to online. We used to say that the schools are reducing burden, but the after-class homework is still mountain. And now the online and offline are also going different ways. So our battlefields have changed, and our methods have to change as well. We pay high attention to that problem. We are already working with certain departments to study the policies and documents. They are about to be publicized very soon. But before the unveiling of such a document, we have to compare the offline methods to regulate those online training courses and institutions. If the document is open to the public, since then, we will certainly take strict measures to reduce the burden both online and offline. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Last year, in some places of China, there have been the security problems on campus. Will the Ministry of Education take more measures to regulate the security on campuses and avoid similar cases from happening? School security involves different sectors. I can say that for families with a child, they are all concerned about school safety. There are reasons known to all and known to nobody. In recent years, Ministry of Education and Ministry of Public Security, as well as the Food Safety Bureau, are working closely together to regulate the school security. What is this problem about? It is quite complex, and that's why it requires the cross-disciplinary efforts. The basic principle is we have to get to the root in prevention and take fundamental measures to tackle it and start from the policy level in order to make breakthroughs. With such principles, we have made significant improvements. To give you some figures, now in kindergartens and primary and secondary schools, 86% of them have been equipped with the school guards. 70% of those schools have established their own security mechanism, reaching the national standard. More proof? In recent years, for the severe mortality cases, the number of such cases has been reduced by 10 percentage points every year. For the accidents like trams or transportation accident, they also have been reduced. These all are good signs of the school security. But on the other hand, we have to be aware that there are some emerging challenges for school safety.
We haven't finished with the old problems, and there are some new problems to come. So we have to form the synergy in collaboration with the other departments. There are three things to do. First is to strengthen the basis. For example, the basis of the general management and of the technology. And the second, we should work with the other ministries, especially the Ministry of Public Security, so we can have the mission of protecting the campus. By the last day of February, we have started the mission. We have to carry out those pragmatic actions so the kindergartens and the school could be secured. And the third is the accountability system and the inspection work. Security is the highest demand for us. It's like a huge mountain. You have to support that. Thank you. I'm from China Education TV. Good morning, Mr. Minister. You have mentioned over the last year, the Ministry of Education has stricken down the off-school training programs, but there is an increase of burden with the parents, and some homework given to the children are out of their capacity. Do you have relevant measures to tackle that problem? It's related to the first question that I've received. It's about the reduction of the overburden. I mean the burden that is too much for the children to bear. Actually, some burden is necessary. The children, they need to have to be under certain burden, but not too much for them. I cannot imagine one day that there is zero burden for all the children in China. And for the educational sector, we are moving forward under a certain degree of burden. In recent years, the Ministry of Education has attached great importance to the reduction of burden for the children, and we have adopted various measures. Not long ago, the General Office of the State Council has published 30 articles to reduce the burdens that are considered as the strongest measure ever to reduce the burden. Why is that? Because based on our past experience, we feel that too much burden for the children are due to multiple causes, but they all lead to the same result. We have to take multiple measures to tackle the different roots of this problem. So, how could we tackle this problem? From the side of school, government, teachers, and parents. That means the society should work together with the family. First, from the point of view of the school, they have to have a clear idea and correct idea of schooling. They have to control the total number and class hours. What are the disciplines to put in place, and how many hours should the students follow? And they should also have a strict control of the difficulty degree of each class. During one class, what is the content volume to be given to the student, and how difficult should that be? And also, you should have the fundamental education. Today in China, because the parents are anxious, they will give a lot of preschool education to the students. But it is recommended that we give the children to the teachers, and they will start from zero. Since they don't have the preset knowledge, it's easier for the teachers to educate them. If you have too much intervention in the children's learning, it is bad for their learning. You cannot let the unprofessional people to do the job of the professionals. For the teachers, they have to do two things. First of all, they should educate the children according to the schedule and also the guideline of the teaching. The guidelines will tell you what to teach, and the schedule will tell you at what pace you're going to carry out your education. And second, you have to control the total volume of homework and the degree of difficulty of the homework. You don't need to give difficult puzzles to the students. You can rather choose some homework favorable and friendly to both students and teachers. As to the government, for the quality standard, materials of the teaching, recruitment of the students, evaluation system, and also the full-fledged development are all the possible ways to reduce the burden and improve the education. At the same time, the government should also balance the education quality between the rural and urban areas. And finally, as to the family, the parents, please adopt a rational idea of teaching. You should have a rational expectation towards your children. If you want your children to do something, you should first set the example for them. For those things even you yourself cannot accomplish, please do not force that onto your children. I think that is quite important for the whole society. First of all, please do not spread rumors about education. Second, please do not become a spokesperson for the unqualified training organizations. And third, For those so-called experts on education, we have to leave them aside and ignore their speeches. Today, when talking about education, everyone has their own understanding, and you have to be clever enough to tell which ideas are correct. If we can do our part of work, then the future of our country, the children, they could be more promising and have a better future. So the cut of the burdens, that is an important cause, a mission for us to solve the headache of our educational sector. It's always hard to reduce the burden, but we cannot refuse to do that just because it's difficult. If you don't do that today, then tomorrow the burden will be even bigger. And then, in that case, the children cannot enjoy their study. And if the students are not happy, and then the situation would be hard to deal with. So we will make relentless efforts. The next minister, please. Minister Lu from the Ministry of Natural Resources. Now the floor is open for your questions. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Lu. The Ministry of Natural Resources is a new ministry. What is your work now? In the past, there were lack of coordination of work. What about the status quo, and what are the highlights of your future work? Thank you for your question, and thank you for following our work. I'd like to answer to questions from three aspects. The background of the establishment of our ministry. Last year, in the documents published by the CPC Central Committee for the reorganization of the government organization, in that paragraph concerning the building up of the Ministry of Natural Resources, it is said that the sustainable development of the natural resources is closely connected to the sustainable development of the whole country. So the building up of the Ministry of Natural Resources is one of the important measures of the CPC Central Committee to realize the protection of the ecosystem. It reflects the CPC Central Committee's engagement and determination to sustain the development of the country, and also their resolution to solve the problem from a more efficient way. For some departments, there are overlapping accountabilities, and for the others, there are no coordination at all for the duties. But today, we are considering the bigger picture for all the natural resources, like the lakes, mountains, forests, etc. We consider the management from a general point of view. And as once there is a case of law violation, we can have a more timely response. And also for the distinction of the maritime and aerospace, over time, in the past, there is no consensus, but today we have accomplished that. And also the grassland and the forest land, we have the one single standard to separate them. So for the locals, when they want to give the certificates to the relevant parties, they know what they can do. And also for the plannings, as to the urban and rural plannings, and also the management of the national land resources, in the past, there's lack of coordination, and sometimes the land cannot be used in a legal way and rational way. For the next step, we are about to unify all the existing standards into one. The second thing I'd like to introduce is our responsibilities. In last year's #1 central document, it is said that the Ministry of Natural Resources should have a good responsibility about the management of the nation-owned assets of natural resources, and also it should do a good job in the restoration and protection of the natural resources. Under the guidance of the Xi Jinping thought on the socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era and also the protection of the ecosystem, we have carried out our work from 3 aspects. First one, we have restructured the organization in the old ministries, for example, the Grassland Authority, the National Land Resources, and the Maritime Management Bureau. We have established first the management and the definition of the natural resources, the utilization of the resources in total 4 categories of the work. Second, unification, considering the planning, the general planning of the national land and space, the planning, the urbanization. We have restarted the organizational restructuring. We have created some new departments never seen in history. And third, we have to put in place the basis according to the disposition of the central level. We have collected the information from various departments, and we have led the elaboration of the planning for the management of the land resources in the country and the protection of the natural reserves with the national parks at its core. And also, we have thought about the promotion of the utilization of the natural resources and also the other reforms. All these plans have been adopted by the state authority, and now we have started the 3 major investigations for the natural land and also the utilization of the maritime resources.
Thirdly, according to the instructions of the central government, we will take some focused measures to solve the key issues. Preservation, protection will come first, and restoration will be supplementary. We will control the problem of reducing the area of the ocean. Over the past 5 decades, we are losing a large proportion of our coastal areas. After the 18th National Congress, even though there has been some improvement, we are still facing severe situation. In 1990, the artificial coastline takes up about 18% of the total. By 2017, that proportion was 55%. Since 2002 until now, over 1,100 square kilometers of those areas remain unresolved. And that proportion, of course, before the 18th National Congress was over 70%. That's why we take it very seriously. In addition to some national strategic projects, we will call a halt of some general landfill and reclamation projects. And also, we will try to solve the legacy problems. To minimize the impact of land reclamation over the diversification of the organisms underwater. Before 2015, 15 million mu of approved land and 20 million mu of the idle land are left. So how to revitalize the large sum of land area remains a problem. We reduced the quota of land area to the localities for the first time. And we made breakthroughs in revitalizing such idle land. Last year, 75% of the newly added land area belonged to those idle land. And we also took samples from over 6,000 pieces of land nationwide for the sample investigation. And our treatment of such pieces of land have already been publicized. We also must tackle the challenges. For example, ecology is the largest public good, but we don't have a mechanism of realizing the value of this big public good. We have to explore a good mechanism. Another thing is, even though China has large land area, different localities differ a lot. So how can our land policies fully consider the different natural environments and ecological situations in different localities in order to make our land policies effective and scientific? We also have to study that. In addition, for the water problem, it is paramount in the entire ecosystem. In particular, we are facing climate change, and human behavior is leading to the loss of wetland, and our water storage capacity is damaged. Water pollution is another key issue, so the problem concerning water is critical. It has direct relevance to the ecological remediation in different places. For example, greening afforestation, returning farmland to forestry and grasslands, and other problems concerning the ecology. All of those problems can never be tackled without proper methods of water protection. So we have to work with the other agencies to solve the issues of water protection. By all that, we do face a lot of emerging challenges, but under the leadership of the CPC Central Committee, we are innovating ourselves and we are soliciting opinions from different circles of lives in order to fulfill our responsibilities. Here, I also want to ask our media friends to pay more attention to ecological protection and natural resource conservation. Natural resources are owned by us and our following generations. So we shall consider how to properly utilize such a pool of natural resources with consensus built. Ecological civilization is also a philosophy benefiting us and our descendants. So when our social media are promoting such concepts, we shall shoulder our responsibilities of delivering the right concepts. Thank you. Morning, Mr. Lu. I come from People's Daily. When we are interviewing the grassroots level, some localities are unifying the registration of the properties, but the efficiency has been undermined. It's not as efficient as before when these properties are categorized in registration. So we are saying that sometimes we are causing difficulties for the public when we are streamlining the government. So my question is about such unique, difficult problems. What will be the measures taken by the Ministry of Natural Resources? That's a very key question. The immovable property registration is a very important commercial behavior. It involves the protection of the property rights, the efficiency of market transactions, and so on. We shall be clear that the immovable registration is still a new thing in the past 40 years of reform. The first certificate was issued in 2015, so it was still a new thing. That's why different localities are still exploring the methods. Some places are doing it well, while some others are not regulating their registration behaviors. Last year, we corrected the behaviors in some windows, but still, some problems are not rising from the windows of those offices. We had 4 months of comprehensive investigation. There are in total 95 of registration items for immovables, and the most commonplace are 26 items involving individual, the government agencies, or enterprises trying to get straight some things. And in total, we covered 26 items. We did a flow chart of those 26 items, and we put it on our website. For the next step, according to the instructions of the State Council, as long as the registration agencies of different localities truly study our flow chart of the procedure and take one of the 3 suggested methods, they can surely solve the problem. The first one is integration of information. The second one is the procedure streamlining. And finally, the personnel reform. We have to remember that the 26 items involve a lot of government agencies. No one government agency can complete the procedure. So I am convinced that different localities, if they truly study carefully such a flow chart, we will be supportive of implementing the instructions of the State Council to handle the registration more efficiently. We will allow one last question within 2 minutes for Mr. Lu. Thank you. I know that you have another title. You're the Chief Supervisor of the Ministry of Natural Resources. So how will your ministry improve the supervision and inspection of natural resources in the future? Our work is based on the supervision and inspection of the land resources, so we want to fully reflect our protection determination and positioning of natural resources. Such a job is different from law enforcement. Our supervision is mostly about engaging with levels of local governments, so we will keep exploring the supervision methods in the field of natural resources in order to safeguard our limited natural resources. And we also aim to improve the efficiency of resource utilization. One point I want to make is our authority comes from the commissioning of the CPC Central Committee. Different localities have very clear stance about safeguarding that authority. So we have confidence to supervise the different localities and explore scientific methods of solving problems by joining hands with the localities. Thank you, Mr. Lu. Next minister, please.
住房和城乡建设部王猛辉部长来到台前，谢谢王部长，感谢您的耐心
Minister
等候。
Wang
下面
of
请
the
记者提问。
Housing and Real Estate Resources.
谢谢部长这边，谢谢主持人。在这里，我是南方报业全媒体南方都市报的记
I'm
者。
from
我的
Nanfang
这个问
Journal.
题是想替我们的网友
My
来问您的。
question
有网
actually
友关
comes
注到
from
呢，今年政府
our
工作报告当中没有再强调
friends from
房
the
子是用来
internet.
住的，不
We
是
have
拿来炒
noticed
的。
that
所以想
it
请
is
问一
no
下部
longer
长，
stressed
这是否意味
that
着房地
housing
产和行业的
should
监
be
管
used
有
for
所调整了？
your
然后还
daily
想请教一下
living
您
instead
怎么
of
样
the
去看当前的
speculation.
这个房地产市场的形势？
So what do you think of that, and what will be the future development of the real estate market in China? Since last year, we have carefully applied the instructions of the CPC Central Committee. Thanks to the efforts of multiple parties, we have stabilized the development of the real estate market. There are 3 changes. First, the housing purchasing surface has reduced, and second, the pricing is stabilized, and third, the market expectation for the housing has become more rational. For 2019, we will continue to apply the decisions of the CBC Central Committee and also carefully apply the long-term mechanism to ensure the sustainable development of the housing market. We will stick to 5 things. First, we will stick to the housing positioning. The houses are for living instead of speculation. Second, we will improve 2 mechanisms. First, the market mechanism for housing, and second is the guarantee mechanism for housing. Third, the cities should play the leading role, and we will adapt our policies to the different situation of the cities. We will improve the evaluation system and early warning system. We have to stabilize the pricing of the market and also the expectation of the market. And fourth, we should restructure the market. Especially, we should improve and support the development of the house renting and leasing market. And fifth, we should make sure that our policies are consistent so there will not be a lot of ups and downs in the market. Next question, please. Thank you. I'm from China Construction Journal. From 2017, for all the prefecture level and above level cities, we have started the classification of the garbages. It is a very difficult process. What are the possible measures? Starting by the end of 2016, actually, our ministry and the other relevant ministries have started the classing of the daily garbages. After 1 year of experience and practices, we have achieved preliminary progress. For the direct prefectures, municipalities, and some of the prefectural level cities, we have started a pilot program. Today, in 46 cities inside the living zones, the ratio of the classification of the garbages is already very high. In Xiamen, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, 70% of the coverage ratio. And secondly, for the central government-related departments and also the troops staying in Beijing, we are urging them to lead the whole society to start the classification of garbage. Starting by this year, for all those cities above the level of prefecture, they should start their own classification work of the garbages. According to the demand from the government's work report, we will take 4 measures. First, we should improve the systems and mechanisms. According to our pilot experiment, each locale should be led by their party secretary, and then we should mobilize the whole society to engage themselves into that. And second, we should start with the children. We first educate the children, and then they will also ask their parents to respect the rule. And third, the major battlefield for the garbage classification is inside the community. We have to mobilize the people, and we can share our contribution and coordinate our efforts to build a beautiful living environment. And fourth, we should mobilize the whole society for the creation of a better environment. Thank you, Mr. Wang, and thank you for your patience. Because he knew that you had a lot of questions for him, he stayed until this moment. In total, our corridor has received 34 ministers answering to the questions of 66 journalists. In total, we have answered 89 questions. the Xinhua News Agency has prepared an online script just for your reference. Starting by the 3rd of March, today marks the 4th Minister's Corridor. Every day, my team and I myself are inspired and moved by your pursuit of the news career. I will never forget these beautiful days. This corridor has a history of 60 years. It's not because there are ministers walking by we have this ministers' corridor. Actually, it's thanks to you, the journalists and friends of the press, that we can have this corridor. I'd like to express to you our gratitude and pay our tribute. And we also have the colleagues coming from the committees from the local provinces and regions. For our team, we are not professional friends of the press. Please tolerate if there are some inconveniences and errors we have caused. I still have a small request to you. We have limited time during the 2 sessions. I will remember how hard you have worked, and I'm so grateful to you. And I sincerely hope that after the 2 sessions, we could stay good friends. And for those things that are not yet accomplished, we could continue to work on that after the mission. And now we have discovered that we cannot cover all your questions. That is a big pity, and I'd like to say sorry to you.
Hello everyone, welcome to join CGTN's live stream in front of the Great Hall of the People in central Beijing. I'm Li Jingjing.
I'm John Goodrich, and we have just heard the second part of the 4th Minister's Corridor of the 2 sessions.
Yes, today is the 10th day of the 2 sessions, and also we just finished the second part of the 4th Minister's Corridor. So by far, almost all ministers from Chinese department have walked into the spotlight to answer key questions from the reporters, and all the issues are kind of really important public issues. And today,
we're in the kind of the final stages of the 2 sessions now. So the ministers' corridors have wrapped up. We've got the final press conferences coming up as well. We've got the Supreme People's Court today. So we've heard a lot of interesting answers from the various ministers. We just had education, for example. We had intellectual property earlier today. And you can read all about the details on our website or on our app.
Yes. And John and me would like to tease out the major public issues that happened so far. But before we do that, let's take a moment to look at the weather today, because the weather couldn't be any better today. Behind us is the Great Hall of the People. You can see how clear and blue the sky is. And over there on our live set is the Tiananmen.
The Forbidden City just behind there, no?
Yes, exactly. This landmark building of Beijing. And our cameraman, please turn your camera over there. In front of us is this National Museum of China. So to those of you who accuse the weather of Beijing, I would like you to see this moment, because today's weather is really, really good and everything here looks pretty awesome. The only problem is it's pretty windy, so you probably can hear from our microphone.
And tell from our hair.
Yes, you can tell this from our hair. Our hair looks crazy right now. That's because of this weather.
It's a beautiful day, beautifully clear, beautiful blue skies, and the sun is out, but it's windy, and the flags up there, you can probably hear them from the microphone. I've been fluttering non-stop all day long. And it's a little bit chilly.
Yeah, it's a little bit chilly, but still I take this clear and sunny day as a metaphor to the future of our country, to my country, because everything going on during the 2 sessions is pretty promising. So we're going to see a lot of change that will affect Chinese life and also the international relations to many aspects life. So John, I have a question for you actually. As a foreign reporter covering this year's 2 sessions, what's your take so far?
Well, I think overall it's been a slightly more low-key 2 sessions than perhaps we've seen in the past. It's been a lot about stability, emphasizing like stable progress, I think. And we heard that right from the beginning from Li Keqiang's work report, the Premier's work report, and through to Wang Yi's press conference, which was obviously one of the highlights for most foreign viewers, and also the Commerce Ministry's press conferences, which I think for people looking from overseas, these are the ones people are really interested in because they do affect China's relations with the outside world. But yeah, as I say, I think stability, a calmness, a certain caution, not getting too carried away, like a realistic approach to the future have been kind of the watch phrases of the 2 sessions so far.
And among so many public issues that have been discussed during these 2 sessions, which do you care the most? Which you think that it will bring a lot of influence to expats in China and also probably other countries?
Well, one of the most interesting is the environment. We've been talking about the blue skies here, and obviously tackling pollution is a huge issue for China and other countries around the world, and it's making steady progress. It's one of the 3 critical or tough battles: pollution, poverty, and risk. Cutting down on those things, mitigating those factors, and we're seeing today an example of how China is improving. It's such a beautiful day, and for foreigners thinking about Beijing, they don't always picture this. They don't always picture this scene. So I think this is encouraging for people overseas and for foreigners living here as well. They enjoy these days. They're becoming less and less a rarity.
We have been living in Beijing for so many years. We do see the change of the weather in Beijing because I still remember many years ago, the smog was so heavy, and probably in a year we see over 200 days of heavy smog, but right now the blue sky is the norm in Beijing. This is the normal weather that we see every day almost. And you can see behind me there were reporters slowly walking out of the Great Hall. The people, that's because of the Minister corridor that just finished. And yeah, you talk about the weather and the things that will affect our foreign audience in front of the camera actually.
Yeah, and beyond these, the environment is a big issue for around the world, and China's obviously playing a leading role in tackling climate change globally. But beyond that, obviously at this 2 sessions we've heard a lot about trade and also a lot about investment within China. And this afternoon there's going to be further deliberations within the NPC delegations, the provincial delegations, about the foreign investment law, which is going to be revised over the next couple of days, and then which is going to be put to a vote on Friday. And I think a lot of people around the world are watching to see how that plays out, what the change will be, what the final result will be, and then how that is put into practice over the next few months.
Yeah, and this morning, actually, just during this minister corridor that just finished, most of the issues probably mainly affects people domestically because the Minister of Education promised they will relieve the burden for students, and also the Minister from Human Resource and Social Security, they promise they will keep boosting more jobs because actually it's already, they create I think 1.3 million jobs for 6 years in a row, even though like this year China's economy is not that promising. We face a little bit turbulence, especially facing these trade conflicts between China and the US. Even though it's not very promising, but they still succeeded to create more jobs. So it's mainly affect the Chinese, but I believe there's one thing that will have an impact to also audience in other countries, that the Minister of Intellectual Property promised they will continue to make more efforts to protect intellectual property, and that's gonna bring huge change to the market, to this playground. What do you think?
I think from an overseas point of view, then the intellectual property head was interesting because he was saying that they're going to crack down on intellectual property violations and also cut down on trademark review periods, which means that you can get a trademark faster. And also we had today the Supreme People's Court had delivered a work report, and intellectual property is something that they also oversee, and they've created a court for intellectual property at the highest level now. So it's one of the issues which foreign companies and foreign countries have sometimes had concerns about in China, intellectual property rights and violations. But today we've heard things about how China is trying to reassure overseas companies and trying to make sure there's an even playing field, which will encourage further foreign investment here.
So today is the 10th day of the 2 sessions, and tomorrow is the end day for CPPCC, and on Friday, the 15th, there will be the end day for the NPC. So please do stay tuned at CGTN, because in the next few days, there will be a final decision for this major law, the foreign investment law. This probably one of the most important thing of this year's 2 sessions, which is going to bring a lot of change to the market in China and also affect investors from different countries. So please do stay tuned.
Yeah, and also on Friday we can expect a press conference to wrap up the 2 sessions at the end of the National People's Congress session. And if you're looking for news lines, stories about, for example, China and the US and how trade talks are progressing, then we can expect more to come out of that, as well as a wrap up of everything that we've seen over the past 10 days. And by that time, how long will it be? 2 weeks? Nearly.
Probably, yeah. Okay, so once again, thank you for watching us. We will continue to bring more information of the 2 sessions in the next few days. And if you want to search for more information, please check our app, our website, and our social networks on all platforms. I'm Jingjing once again.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.